every single day.
People want to connect with someone who...
Self-expression is life.
It is the challenge. It's a challenge of life.
You can't get mad at other people for not seeing your vision.
It was all about a grind. Like I said, I was selling CDs, DVDs, and clothes out the trunk of my
Whatever
car.
it takes.
This is for the people. Don't forget that. What's up, Lawline family? Zach here, episode 26 with my good friend David Schnurman. We are in Prospect Park, Brooklyn, in his apartment. Thank you so much for letting us come and interview you.
Thanks for coming to No Park Slope to do the interview.
We learned very, very quickly. There's no parking around here. Take an Uber. I wish I listened.
No, but from Queens, you got to drive. But I appreciate you making the effort because, as I was saying, I don't think I can remember the last time I've done a podcast interview in person, and it's nice and refreshing to not have to be on Zoom, and I'm sure it will resonate as well.
Yeah. So do you mind just letting everyone know who you are, what your business is, and how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, sure. And I'll tell you instead of, I guess, staring at them because they'll get the gist. But I started Lawline in 2007. But my story in general is I went to college, graduated in 1999. I thought within the first year I'd make $1 million or I'd start my own business. 4 or 5 years later, I was doing different sales jobs. I was on my 4th or 5th sales job, not making anywhere close to that. And 9/11 happened, and I realized I didn't want to just keep 20 years going by and just being miserable in what I was doing. So I just quit my job literally within a month of 9/11, trying to figure out what to do next. And I ended up becoming a real estate broker. And when I studied for the real estate exam, I actually did a good job being a broker. I really loved the studying of it. So I realized, you know what, maybe I'll go to law school. And my dad's a lawyer, and all he ever wanted me to do was become a lawyer. So it was the last thing I wanted to do. So I went to law school, and in law school, I actually I always wanted to be an entrepreneur, like I said. I actually started doing interviews like this. I had a show called True NYC because I was trying to find that magic answer on how to start a business. And this was the first year YouTube got started, and I put it out there.
Love it.
And by the time I graduated law school, I realized I can make these interviews and turn them into courses with lawyers. And it was a business my dad had started in 2000, but stopped it in 2001. And so in 2007, when I graduated law school, I took these interviews on the road, took Lawline, created courses, and I guess 15 plus years later, we're now the largest provider of online continuing legal education in the country, with over 150,000 attorneys who have used us. I think 6 million courses completed on our site. That's
amazing. I actually know a lot of attorneys who use Lawline.
Oh, fantastic.
It's really cool to say I know the guy.
I get, every time I meet an attorney who uses us, I always feel like it's so cool for me.
Yeah.
It never gets old. So
yeah, I feel the same way with John Kluggers. And my first reaction is always like, how was your experience? Before I tell you I own it.
And I think if they tell you that they're a customer, you can generally see in their face if it's a good experience or not.
Yeah.
But yeah, totally.
So one of the coolest things about our relationship together is when I first became an entrepreneur, I did something called EO, Entrepreneurs Organization. In the beginning, you're considered an accelerator if you're under $1 million. Even when I passed $1 million, I didn't want to graduate because I got so much out of the accelerator program, but you were my mentor. And I know that for people that are watching this that aren't EO members, you took on a huge responsibility of being the EO president. Do you mind just talking about why take on that and what it did for you?
2 things. One, I was a mentor for several years in a row. And it was really when I look to who I am as an individual, one of the things I could not stop this if I wanted to. When I have knowledge that I've gained, I need to share it. I need to help others with it. And mentoring is the best impact you can have, even though it's very specific. And also what I learned is when you mentor others, teaching is the best form of learning because you have to hone down your craft. And I think it was 4 or 5 years in a row I did mentorship, and I loved it with you guys. We had a lot of fun too.
We did, yeah.
And I learned a lot. I think we both learned a lot together and built a relationship. So that's why I did that. It was a core value of my life. I've been an EO member for 15 years. I started as an accelerator. I was the first accelerator.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
And I remember when I started as an accelerator, I said, this is the organization that I've always wanted to start myself. Wow. I said, someday, if I can, I'll be president. And I was on the board for several years, and they asked me to be president one year. I said no. And then I was in the middle of finishing my book. And my book, called The Fast Forward Mindset, was how to get out of your comfort zone. And I also put my vision in the book, which was focusing on inspiring entrepreneurs, disrupting education, and focusing on sustainability and lifelong learning. And I told my dad about that. I was like, they asked me again, it's a big commitment. And he's like, does this fit the vision of what you want to impact? I'm like, well, inspiring entrepreneurs, I guess there's no better way to do it than being president of EO. So I said yes. And my biggest fear actually was running the monthly board meetings with 12 other entrepreneurs. Right. Who you had to manage and who were volunteers. And I thought I was afraid I would do a bad job. And it turns out I really excelled in it. And it gave me a lot of confidence that I actually, in a way, I excelled sometimes better there than I do in my own company, which we can get into if you want.
Yeah, let's do it. I think one of the coolest things that being a mentee of yours is just the amount of positivity that you express. I remember coming to your office. This is in beginning of my entrepreneur journey. We're talking about 10 years ago already? At least. Scary. It's crazy to think back, but looking at your beautiful office, one of the coolest things that I remember is that was your dad's law office, right?
Originally, yeah.
And it got to the point where your company got so big that you took over and it became your office, right?
It was a little more complicated than that, or bigger than that. So I started in my dad's kitchen, and it was built as a law office. Then the what do you call those? The tile roofs. Okay, if it pops in your head, just say it. It's the fake ceilings,
right?
Drop ceilings.
Drop ceilings.
And it's depressing for me. It was just lots of offices, but I was free rent. So we started in the kitchen, and literally attorneys would come in and wash their dishes as we're taking customer service calls.
Amazing.
It doesn't get more embarrassing than that.
I love that.
And then we took another office, and we kept growing. And then we had to take sublease other offices at a co-working space. What was a co-working space then? Not like WeWork, but it was different because there was no space left. Then his lease was up. And then I had to make a decision. Do I take over the whole space or do I just go somewhere else? And so after about a year of negotiating with the landlord, not only did I decide to take over the new space, we left it, we knocked everything down and built it as an open floor, high-tech space with glass walls.
Yeah, I think that's when
high ceilings like this, and just no drop ceilings. We built a TV studio. It was gorgeous.
Yeah, I remember.
So it was the dream office I always wanted. And it was really inspiring to come in every day.
And now you're 100% virtual.
So it's funny. I also always had the dream to be virtual to some degree because I also personally, I struggle with small talk in offices in general.
I can relate, yeah.
And also commuting, but that's not it. It's just literally sitting at a desk all day, having to stare at your computer screen. It just felt what am I doing with my life? And I know a lot of people felt that way. That's why there's been such a resistance to going back to the office post-pandemic. I've seen so many statistics. Airlines are back, restaurants are back, everything is back, except office is at 49% capacity. Yep. And so I never think I would have pulled the trigger unless it was for COVID. Yep. So, a few months into it, we went remote. That was 6 years into our lease. Our 7-year lease was up April 2021. Wow. So we said, look, we're not going to renew right now. Let's test out being remote for a year. We already tested it, so I knew it was going to work. Mm-hmm. And then what we did from there was we started hiring people out of New York, tri-state area. So now we have employees, I think, in 12 states. Wow. So it's sort of we burn the ships. We can't just be one day, you know what, guys, let's go back in the office. And so there's been a lot of, advantages to that. Of course, the basic disadvantage of being more, at home all day or whatever, but I wouldn't trade it for anything. And, if you surveyed anyone in my company, it's funny, we've hired so much in the past 2 years. I think we now might have more people, or at least equal, post remote than the old school people from the office.
Wow, that's so amazing. And I know that you've talked a lot about it on social media, how that changed and elevated your business, going fully remote. And it's amazing. Like one of the things I admire so much about you as an entrepreneur is like when you decide to go for a change, you go all in. So like when I first met you, you decided I'm going to redo this whole office space. And I remember coming in and you had that big, beautiful boardroom with like an insane television setup. And, just like it felt so amazing to go in there to do our EO meetings.
Yeah. I'm lucky to have really great mentors in my life. One of them being my father, who anytime I've had a big decision to make, he's always been there, whether it's buying a new home or building that office space, moving to Barcelona, becoming president of EO. It's really great to have somebody, especially your father, who's there and been through that, because he is an entrepreneur as well, who can give you that guidance. So while I ultimately made the decisions, I definitely leaned on a lot of people to do that, to have the confidence to do that.
It's great. So moving to Barcelona, I remember at the time when you decided I'm going to move my whole family to Barcelona, I was so fucking jealous. And then as soon as you got there, the pandemic happened. Like literally, right?
9 months later.
9 months later?
Yeah,
okay. So it felt very soon, but what was that experience like? I'm sure looking back, how long have you been back in Brooklyn now for?
A year and a half almost now, yeah.
So I'm sure you would never change anything, right?
Never in a second. Like, in fact, we were like this close to staying a third year.
Oh, wow.
And this close from like staying for good, but we have our family here and my company here, but I can't tell you what an amazing opportunity and experience it was for the family. Pre-COVID, we traveled to so many countries. Right. Post-COVID, we travel a lot in Spain, but then we were able to travel a lot once things lightened up. But the thing that was so interesting for me was I thought I would have all the friends I've had. You're 42 or 40, you're not going to make new friends at that point.
No.
And you generally make new friends when your kids are younger. When you go somewhere as an expat, there's all these other expats there. And everybody's looking to make new friends because they're all relocated. Yeah. And I think within a few months, we had a whole new community of amazing people from all over Europe, all over the world, actually, and from the US who were there. And I'm still very close with a lot of them. And it just opened me up to realizing, like, I'm not done yet with, like, expanding, making new friends and community. Yeah. And it goes to the small talk thing. One of the things that I have to reprogram myself on is I can get really stuck on being introverted in that I want to stay on my computer, I want to think really hard, and I want to brainstorm and do things, which is great, but sometimes not great, because I've learned over the years, and you've gone through your own challenges, a strong community is the most important thing. 100%. And my wife is really good at that. I am not. And so I want to continue building relationships and reaching out to people. And we haven't seen each other in person since 2019.
That's so wild.
But I consider you as part of my community.
Of course.
And I would love to continue building on that relationship. So
yeah, and I also can relate because I hate small talk, but I also love deep, meaningful relationships. And I feel like that's what you and I always got along when you were mentoring me, is like, I don't want to do like the, hey, how's your week going? But I want someone to be like, this is what my game plan is for my company for the next 5 years. And then here's some feedback about areas that I'm forgetting.
By the way, that's what's so great about EO. Most people are there not to have small talk, they're to have those deep, big conversations. And I recently actually joined YPO as well.
Shout out to YPO.
Yes, before I got aged out. My birthday was in August and I turned 45.
Oh, I didn't realize.
Yeah, and Forum is about those deeper conversations. So absolutely, like my wife, who is my best friend as well, she can only take so many deep conversations with me. So she's like, take those other places, And Like if you want to talk about the meaning of life, let's do it. Like I'll do it all on any topic really. But if you want to talk about sports, I don't really know much.
Yeah,
unfortunately.
So moving to Barcelona, forgetting the pandemic, like what made you decide, right? Because like you just got your place. You were in a very comfortable place with your business.
Yeah.
I know for a while you had extreme growth, right? So like everything was looking great. Why make yourself uncomfortable with moving a family of 5 to Barcelona?
So it wasn't an overnight thing. One of my friends, several EO members had done that, where they relocated their families to Barcelona, spent a couple of years there, and then came back. One of them was David Rich. And I literally started talking to him probably as early as 2015.
Oh, wow.
And tell me about the experience. And every year, because I journal every day. And if I search David Rich in my online journal, I can see like all the conversations I had with him. And it was probably like 5 or 6, once or twice a year that we would have it. The turning point was in 2016. We actually read this book called 3 Questions for a Frantic Family, because we were a frantic family, by Pat Lencioni, who also wrote 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. Oh. And it was about making a mission statement and core values for your family. And we wrote this mission statement that essentially said, we want to be happy, healthy, confident, and experience life through travel. And so we use that as literally every year we'd say, we need to do a trip. We want to experience life through travel, never thinking that would mean living in Barcelona. And so when the kids were going from elementary to middle school, we had to apply to new schools. So it was almost as a joke or a dare, like, let's apply to schools in Barcelona. And then, we started telling people, we just applied to schools in Barcelona. And like, you started telling people, then we got into the schools. I'm like, let's apply for a visa. That was a process. And we got the visa. Like, let's fly there for the week and find a place. We found a place and we're like, oh, I guess we're moving there.
We're doing this.
So that's how it happened.
I love it.
Yeah, and the kids were on board. They were excited about it. And we just bought a place, but we rented it, and we were lucky to have good renters. And of course, during COVID, actually one of them moved out and still paid rent because their company paid for them to move somewhere else.
Wow.
So they probably took care. The house was probably taken care of better than if we were stuck in here, because we destroyed our apartment in Barcelona.
Yeah.
3 kids, 52 days in a row, kids were not allowed out of their house.
Oh my God.
Like literally by law, it ended up probably being overturned as unconstitutional there. But then, we were able to travel a lot more in Spain than what was going down here for a year.
Yeah, amazing. And, the last time I saw you was when you wrote your book. So for people that want to write books, because I know that is like a huge milestone in an entrepreneur's journey. Like, what would you recommend to someone that wants to take that journey of writing a book, and like, what have you learned doing it yourself?
So it was a big, like, I used to read books all the time. It's funny. Once I wrote the book, I stopped reading books as much. I just recently restarted, and I'm happy I did. And it was a combination of writing the book and then going to Barcelona. Yeah. But it was 2 years to write it.
Wow.
And I can tell you it was like therapy, because a lot of it was my story, but a lot of it was different research and other books and things about mindset. But it was spending an hour or 2 a day writing and focusing on the bigger picture, and then reformulating it to communicate it better. It was painful, but I loved the pain. Like, it was so. I'm actually writing a second book right now.
Oh, you are?
It's about the experience moving to Barcelona, and it's called The First 100 Days, and it's about our first 100 days in Barcelona. But the bigger theme is how, for anybody, the first 100 days can be the next 100 days of the rest of their lives. Like, because we think we're stuck in where we're at, and just make that leap and focus on that. And so what I do in the book, I share a couple things, and then I take my journals from the first 100 days, and I share a little clip, a little 300 words or less from each day of a highlight of like something. And sometimes there's lessons, sometimes there's not. It might not be good, but it's easier to do that but I think it will be good for some, and it will be really great legacy for my kids. And that's been a great reliving of my doing it. And so one of the things I've been doing for a long time that is something I would share, journal every day.
Yeah.
especially like I just shared with my sister a journal from 2016 when I was complaining about something, and I sent it, and I complain about the same thing all the time, spending too much money on this or whatever. I WhatsApped her. I'm like, guess what year this journal is from? And she's like, maybe 2014. I'm like, close, 2016. She's like, yeah, you were just saying that the other day too. And it gets to show you things where you change and things where you stay exactly the same, which you may feel bad about, that you're still doing the same issues.
Right, because you're like, you want to not be thinking about the same thing over and over again.
And that's one of the things I try to do is every few years make a big change. Writing a book, becoming president of EO, moving to Barcelona, joining YPO. And so one of the things I'm trying to focus on, and obviously there's been changes and growth through the business over the years, but I'm still thinking of what's my next big thing over the next year or two.
I feel like when I think of you, that's what I think of.
The next big thing?
Yeah, you're like never 100% satisfied. You're always hungry. And like you meet so many entrepreneurs that are like, I'm good. I got my money. I got my bag. But like for you, it's like that hunger deep down inside. I love it so much because it's so inspiring.
There's a downside to that hunger
Of
too.
course.
But it's totally like I like to feel like a kid in a candy store as much as possible, or more like a student in school.
Yeah.
And that's sort of if my company feels more like we're students in schools versus working at a company, I feel like that's a good thing because we're trying experimenting. But yeah, I don't know. Do you know Jesse Itzler?
Very well. Yeah, my brother's obsessed with him.
Yeah.
He joined the Big Ass Calendar Club.
Okay, cool.
I have, this is the first time I'm going to say it on camera, but I am obsessed with sauning and ice cold baths. And
you bought one?
When I got out of surgery, the first thing I did when I realized like I'm going to live, I'm going to be okay, is I bought a sauna, which is coming in April. So obviously I'll have you down when it's ready, if you like saunas.
So we're redoing our downstairs, and I found a portable sauna. I was like, oh, they're portable. They're easy to get in. I was like this close to buying it. And then apparently I'm not allowed to have any rooms for myself in the house.
Obviously.
But I'm totally for that. And also the ice and things like that. Because when you go on vacation, you go in a sauna, you're like, this is great. Why don't I do this more often?
This is like, Roger, how do you describe it? It's like its own structure outside. It's like a little hut.
Yeah, no, I did a lot of research. I'll send you the one I found, but you ordered it. So
I'm done. I'm ready. It's getting made.
You deserve it. And I'll say back to Jesse Itzler. So one of the things that he says, and he had a course, and I took the course, and I actually took a lot of great notes in it. He has a term for it, but it's like once a year you should do one big thing, whether it's an athletic thing or whatever, but something big and different. And then once every 2 months you should do smaller things that you've never done before, new experiences. And I'm a big believer of that. Like life is about experiences.
Yeah,
and so that's what these big things are for me. One of my big things is, which maybe I'll wait till I'm a little older, is become a pilot. But yeah, and then for me, so I'll stop there.
So people love Jesse, right? Like what part of him do you feel like you relate to so much? Because like I feel like he's like the package, right? When you think about an entrepreneur, he's like really good at social media. He's super driven. He's obviously very successful. He's had a lot of amazing exit plans from his businesses. He's married to another billionaire, successful entrepreneur. I'm blanking on her name.
Sarah Blakely.
So like what part?
The more successful of the two.
Yeah, I know. And he's very honest about it. But like, what do you feel like? Because I feel like he's the next Gary Vee. And when I was your mentee, I was obsessed with Gary Vaynerchuk, but I felt like I couldn't, like his strategy of just like grinding until you're dead.
Yeah.
I don't agree with anymore. But I feel like everyone loves Jesse because he has the right morals. So I'm curious, like, what do you feel like you can resonate with him?
Yeah, it's interesting because everything's about different stages. And like, I don't see him as much online as I used to, but maybe I'm looking in the wrong places. But like, one of the things that inspires me about him is his discipline in athletics.
Yeah.
I'm a runner. He's a runner.
Yeah.
Certainly the way I got to know him was the book with David Goggins before David was
Oh,
living
yeah.
with the SEAL. So I don't know if you read that book.
No, but now that you mention
Dude.
it, yeah.
Listen to it on Audible. It is not only so good, it's so entertaining. So I listened to
didn't
that
even
book
think
and I'm
about
like,
that.
who is this guy? He's amazing. And I knew of him because of a friend of mine who actually knows them. And so I didn't know him before that. He's like, you'll probably like this. And so then I started getting hooked. And he kept growing his brand as people got a good reaction to the book. And so, yeah, I think the discipline to get up and push his body every day
I love that.
is where I think where most of us in life will spend more time on the computer than we should versus doing push-ups, exercise, eating healthy. One thing that he did that transformed my life, this is all the way going back to 2016 because I saw it in a journal today. I started pretty much, and I hold to it mostly, is fruit till noon. Do you know about that?
Of course, yeah.
I'll have coffee. I had an apple, but I generally try not to eat anything till noon. And now I've actually started doing a little bit intermittent fasting where I try not to eat after 8. And I'm doing this for one reason only: energy.
Yeah, I agree.
It's not about weight; it's
No.
about energy. And I feel better when there's less in your stomach. And then he mentioned this book called Fit for Life, which the author recently passed away, who was a big mentor to him. And he's like, it's all about when you have food in your stomach, especially a lot of food, all the blood goes there.
Yeah, you're trying to process the food. It's impossible.
So that's what is, and I've known people who've lived to 100 years old plus and are close to that. And I asked them, what's the secret to living a long life? They said, eat very little, in your meals. And I was like, all right, I'm not the best at that. So I'm a vegetarian. And so like sometimes it gets harder. So yeah, that's one of the things. I can go on about Jesse, but I'll stop there.
No, I think that's great. I mean, I've talked about this a lot in the podcast. You've touched a lot about that you're a vegetarian and the sustainability aspect. But I'm just curious, like, why did you decide to go vegetarian?
So truth be told, I was a picky eater growing up. And so I didn't eat meat until I was 18 years old.
Oh, wow.
It just grossed me out. So like I never had a thing for it. And then I started eating it because I was like working out in high school. I'm like, well, you need protein. So essentially from 18 to 31, I ate meat. I would call it reluctantly. Yeah, I would eat it, or chicken or whatever. And then when I was 31, 32, I actually decided to run my first marathon. I started reading these books about these ultra marathon runners Rich Roll was one.
Yep.
There's a couple others who are missing their name who are all vegan, plant-based diets, not vegan. And by the way, so is Jesse Itzler. He is plant-based only. And they were saying how much energy they got. And I was like, you know what, let me do a challenge. Let me see if I can go, 30 days vegan. And I loved it. I got so much more energy. Then I went 6 months. And then I realized I changed my habits, where my biggest issue was I was eating too much cheese. And so
I feel like a lot of vegetarians.
Totally. And I was just it was probably I'm lactose intolerant. So I cut that back to like only delicious pizza, really.
A Jew that's lactose intolerant, who would have ever expected?
Right, exactly. So, and then I was like, you know what? I had no need to go back to meat. And then it started becoming more aware of factory farming. And we did courses on that on Lawline, and I started all these documentaries that started going out, and I started reading more about it. And then that gave me more of a mission behind it for the health of the animals, the planet, and people. And then it expands from there. But I really do think it's one of the biggest evils of when we look back at this time in our human evolution, that we had to do that. Now, of course, they're now able to start. They just got approvals, and it's just going to come to the market soon, where they're growing real life chicken breasts and chicken from cells.
Yeah.
And so that, between all the plant-based alternatives, which are but that are there'll be a time when we look back where there'll be better, cheaper options that are not from real animals.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm like the exact opposite, and not in the sense that all I do is eat meat, but the meat I do eat, I make sure it comes from a sustainable way. So there's one company, shout out to Heritage, where they do the right thing. You know, they're not just growing meat for eating. You know, they follow the entire cycle. So someone else that we've had on the podcast, Lloyd from Double L Market, he gets sustainable meat. So I try to only eat sustainable meat. But I was just curious because my brother's the same way. He's only vegetarian and, you know, you're very active. So I was curious to hear if you felt like you were eating more carbs because of the fact that you are not eating any sort of meat.
So I also do eat fish.
I love fish, yeah.
So I eat fish. I don't necessarily make it at home, but if we go out and that's an option, I'm sure I do, but I'm definitely aware of it now more than I used to be. Look, when you're eating specific diets in general, you have to live a life by design when you're trying to figure out your meals. And that's one of what I love about not working at an office anymore, because it's like, go downstairs to the freaking salad bar place and spend $25 on crap and then sit at your desk and eat. Now I can, be thoughtful about, okay, what am I eating today? How am I eating it? And eat cheaper and more healthy. Yeah. But yeah, sometimes I'm more hungrier. I'd rather leave a meal hungry than really full, because I know what that feels like. Yeah. But sometimes, like, even now, like, I'm a little hungry because I haven't eaten yet.
But that's normal, right? Like, people forget that.
It's also normal to not leave a meal nauseously full, which I didn't know for a long time.
Yeah, I agree.
So yeah, and like, I'm not like I'm not against other people eating animals, right, and meat, and like in a sustainable way for sure. I have a lot of friends who are farmers who do that, and it's an important part of who we are as a whole. Yeah. But if you were to ask the questions, could we have a sustainable Earth with nobody eating meat? I think the answer is definitely yes. Because where do the animals get their protein from? Plants. Right. Like, that's where it is. But I don't expect that to change anything. And of course that would lead to other probably issues, anything in the extreme.
Yeah. I'm cognizant of the fact that, like, people aren't going to only eat this heritage farm company because the meat is, it's like $20 a piece of chicken versus going to McDonald's and they pay $5.
Well, and it's also like, what does the government subsidize? And, that's what leads to the choices that we make. And, farmers are incentivized, especially like corn as an example. Right. A lot of what animals eat is cornmeal, not hay, for example, for cows. And it's a completely different thing. Or like, obviously with chickens, I'm sorry, I don't know how we got into this whole thing in an entrepreneur show.
It's important.
Like, chickens now grow, to full size, like 5 times as fast as they used to, and they're huge and they're overgrown because they're pumped and they're pumped with steroids, antibiotics, because all the things. And like, and salmon, you would think that's okay, but you've now seen all of the documentaries, I'm sure, about salmon farming, and like they've had cameras go in there, and like they look like creatures from another world because they're just stuck in a net. Right. And the amount of iron, and like, again, I don't have all the solutions. I need to do a lot more reading and focusing, because one of the things I talk to my friend about a lot is, and I'm guilty of this as much, is like those people who talk a lot about sustainability or any sort of thing that they're strong about, but they're not really educated on it, but they also don't really do anything. So it's one thing, like, what can you do? What not just the lifestyle choices you can make, but how can you actually have an impact? Yeah. And obviously the biggest way to have an impact is government, where you get the government to spend money. And that, like, this most recent bill that came out, what is it, the Sustainability Act? That's putting billions and billions of dollars into solar power and re-energizing that whole industry again. So yeah, I would love to figure out how I can be more impactful from action there than just like talking.
Yeah. Being an entrepreneur and also being a parent. I don't have as much experience as you. My daughter, she's 2 years old. My wife's pregnant right now with our second. You have got way more experience than I do, but any advice to any entrepreneurs that are watching in terms of what it's like to balance the entrepreneur roller coaster of the highs and lows and also, being present and aware as a parent?
I mean, certainly there's a lot that we all are all trying to navigate together, but I could share one story that right after we moved to Barcelona, it was maybe about a few months after we were living there. My daughter was in 6th grade at the time, and I said to her, how has this experience been for you? What's it been like to move to a new school, move to a new country that doesn't speak English?
Oh, they don't speak English?
No. The school did,
Yeah.
but just moving to a Spanish-speaking country. What's it been like for you? And she said this. She goes, it wasn't as hard as I thought it would be. And I said, that's amazing. And I said, what does that tell you about other things that you think will be hard? And she goes, maybe those won't be as hard as I think they'll be as well. Wow. And I think that to me is a lesson that we can all take. Because by the way, I felt the same thing. I was like, this is not so like, because there's an expat community, it's an international school. You felt at the end of the day, people are people. They all want to just live their lives and do different things. And so I think recognizing a lot of the concerns that our kids have and the fears that they have is no different than what we have.
Yeah.
But you might not know them for a while. Like one more example of that is when we went to London, my 6-year-old son at the time got lost for like 15 minutes by the London Eye, thousands of people around. Wow. 15 minutes is an eternity for us and for him.
Yeah.
3 years later, I was in his class last week, and he wrote an essay it's called Lost in London.
Wow.
And he wrote in the essay that it was the scariest moment in his life, and all he kept wondering was who would be his new family.
Wow.
And I know, like, that's how deep 3 years later, that's like what he's talking about. And so I wonder, like, what are the things that our kids will be writing about 3 years from today, about the fears that they're facing? So that's what I try to do a better job at, is like better understand the struggles. But it's tough because you're preachy as like the last people kids generally want to hear from is their parent.
Yeah. Sure.
And I always wish I was more that A-type male where like my kids would listen up attentively and like want to follow me and like do that. But that's just not the real situation. And so it's a more comfortable feeling where they're just like, shut up, dad, or like or they're just like don't want to listen. And I think most parents suffer through kids addicted to screens,
right,
don't want to clean. They have a easier life than we had, as it should be. But like, so yeah. And we're definitely guilty of complaining about the olden days when I was a kid. I'm like, right, oh no, that's what we're doing.
Oh, for sure. I mean,
we played outside. We listened to our parents. Right. So yeah.
Like Marley, my daughter now, she'll like grab my phone and hold it up to my face because she knows.
Oh yeah, unlock it.
Yeah. And it's just like, this is insane. It's like crazy. She's 2.
But there is hope, which is insane. There is hope because while my 9-year-old was 6 I was telling him the story, he's an expert in Fortnite, but at the same time, he's awesome in the Rubik's Cube. So the fact that that he's still like that real physical Rubik's Cube, he still does well. And of course, there's a ton of studies now about, one, people who are good in video games actually applies to a lot of different things. Yeah. And then 2, there's a book that I'm reading now by Jason Pfeffer, who is the chief editor at Entrepreneur Magazine. It's called Build for Tomorrow. And he talks about, in history, whenever something new came around, the fear that everybody would have, how it would affect them. And I think that was one of the things when radio first started, the fear of music being taken away from live orchestra to putting into the radio at home will destroy lives. It will be terrible. Yeah. When margin first came out, the butter companies, they got the laws changed, so margin couldn't be sold in certain areas. They had to change its color to look less appealing. Wow. So change has always been hard in every area, and obviously radio, TV had the same situation. So maybe that's all we're really going through. But I think it's different. Like when you see what's going on with ChatGPT that just came out, like.
Yeah. So what is this? Because you sent me something right before, but
you don't know what it is?
No, I don't know what it is.
You've been busy.
I've been a little busy lately.
Imagine Google on steroids. Imagine a true AI entity that you can say, ask me what would be the best questions I could write interviewing somebody who runs a continuing legal education company who used to mentor me.
Wow.
It will give you within 5 seconds exactly how to do that interview. And I can show you after this, but you can get as specific of like, any specific, it actually can actually write code too. And it just came out. It's free right now. Eventually it's going to cost money, of course. But this is the base level. It's been really helpful for people in my company writing content for blogs, descriptions for courses.
Wow.
My mind is blown, to be honest, and everybody's is. So, where we're going to be, and it's just like jobs are not going to be as relevant. Like,
wow.
I didn't realize how stupid I was until I started doing stuff. I'm like, oh, that's how I would like frame things if I had that all there. And so hope explains it a little bit.
Yeah. Running has played such a huge part in your life. Like why? Why did you gravitate towards running? You've ran multiple marathons by this point. I know you've done these incredible hikes up, to these milestones, but like, why do you feel like, what kind of, besides obviously the physical aspect, why do you feel like you've gravitated towards running?
Well, there's a story behind that. I actually, in 2011, never ran more than a 5K at once.
Wow.
Barely that. Like, I didn't run at all. And I read the book, The Success Principles by Jack Canfield.
Yeah, I love that book.
Yeah, it's amazing. I actually listened to it and then I read it. Principle number 46 is keep your commitments. And at that time, I realized how often I was breaking commitments, whether it was cleaning the dishes, breaking meetings. And my twins were, a few years old. I put on a lot, like 20 pounds or whatever, and I wasn't exercising. And I remember thinking, like, what was the scariest? And my dad, by the way, has been a marathon runner for years. But I remember thinking that's the last thing I would ever want to do. Like, it was just painful. And so I thought about what is the scariest thing I could commit to athletically, and it was a marathon.
Wow.
So I did it with a colleague who worked at Lawline, and I was like, all right, I'm going to commit to the Philadelphia Marathon. And once you commit, you got to do it. And so that's what got me started.
Wow.
And what got me addicted was how you can go from running no more than 3 miles to being able to run 26 miles in just under 4 months was mind-blowing to me. Like, to go through that discipline process. And then I don't consider myself a quote-unquote athlete. And I look at running as something that you don't have to be an athlete to do. You just start putting your legs together and running. And that's how it is. And then it's such an easy way when you travel, to explore a new area. It's meditation for me. Yeah. And that's it.
Yeah. And I think the runner's high is like a real thing.
It's 100% real.
I'm definitely addicted to. You've had setbacks though along the way, correct? Like right now you have a herniated disc.
Yeah, nothing to do with running.
Sure, but I'm sure that that stops you, that prevents you from running, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
So when these setbacks happen, what is your mind process to get back into the swing of things so you're able to do things you love, like running?
So let's talk about the herniated disc. So I've had a bad back for a long time, but this something took it to the extreme, and I actually think my dog helped with that, because I was walking her 2 miles and she kept pulling, and I think it was hurting, and just, whatever. She's amazing. So I think this time was worse than I've ever had it. And so what did I do? I went out to my network. I posted something on LinkedIn about it. I posted an EO and an EO, and I reached out to people. I got so much great feedback and resources. One was a book called, it's a classic book that was written in the 90s and then updated recently. I think it's called Heal Your Back by Serrano.
Oh yeah, I've heard of this book.
And it's about essentially, it all comes from your mind. He's like, I've seen it all. He's like, physical training, PT, physical training and all that, that's a placebo. Like, you do things, but ultimately the stress in your mind or anger that's built up causes you to be causes your back. And I'll take whatever I can get. And then I spoke to different people. I'm doing physical training now. So I use my community, my resources to try to help me through things.
Love it.
And try to get more disciplined. Somebody recommended doing a 21-day course online from this guy who changed his life. It's 15 minutes a day. Said $60. I'll do it. So I'm on day 9 right now. And I don't know if it's a placebo or not, but I'm definitely feeling better.
Yeah, my brother-in-law, he ruptured one of his discs, and I obviously, like, when we talked, I have like a ton of advice for people, and he was like, how do you know all this? Did this happen to you? I'm like, no. But I feel like because I'm so focused on being preventative and I know how many people get affected by back injuries, I'm always constantly, trying to take 2 steps ahead so I'm not in that position.
Totally.
What I think when Roger and I were talking on the way here, one of the things that people love, and especially is connected to you, is the TEDx. People just, it's like that.
My TEDx, you're saying?
Yeah, and just like that it's like that brain signal that people get so excited. Oh,
meaning you're saying that when somebody does a TEDx,
yes,
they're excited about that.
Yes.
It was a dream of a dream. Yeah, it was a goal of mine for a while, because it's such a cool thing to do.
Yeah.
And I worked with Brian Wish, who helped me with my book. And when I applied to many different ones, there was a journey with that where I actually hired a public speaking coach,
wow,
Polly Rojas, to help me with several different things. And she was transformational in helping me sort of tell a story versus just teach. Yeah. And when you tell a story, you tell it in first person and you let people live through it. And one of the best speeches that I gave before the TEDx was sharing my marathon journey. And when I was at my wall and when I was running, and you actually go through it and you're stuck at your wall and you think you're there and then you realize you're not, and then your energy goes down and like little things like that, because she's actually an actress. And so the TEDx was an opportunity to do that. And what I shared in my TEDx was the story it started with, because it was actually for students, it's for high school students, about when I was in high school, I was called oaf because I grew really quick overnight.
Yep.
And so I was a little less, coordinated in basketball and things like that. And so I shared that story and then how it led to where I am today.
I love it. Any recommendation for people who want to do their own TEDx?
There's books out there like how to do your own TEDx, for sure. But most importantly, it's there's so many TEDx opportunities out there. I would say keep applying first to different ones that interest you. Once you get a book, then worry about figuring out what you're going to talk about.
Love it. What is the future of David Schnurman? What does it look like in terms of what's your goal, not only for your business, but for your own personal life?
Well, when it comes to Lawline, my vision from the beginning was always focused on lifelong learning beyond the mandatory component and continuing to invest in how to make our product more useful to the everyday practice of law, but more useful to the everyday for more people beyond attorneys, professionals who can use.
Nice.
We have a lot of content that is geared towards whether you're an HR professional, an entrepreneur. I had a friend of mine who was recently selling his business, and we have a whole course on valuations. So I sent that to him, and he was like, this was transformational. This was super helpful. And so we have a lot of content that is in that area. But
I love it.
But I've always, year of 2023 will be really where we add more value to the attorney beyond just getting their credit. And we've been doing things every 6 months to update our product, our content to do that. In terms of David Schnurman, that's certainly reinvention is definitely part of it. One of the things that I'm at this point in time where I know 10 years ago, I had a vision of where I wanted to be. I wanted to have a house in Brooklyn. I wanted to have the business be growing. I wanted to write a book. I wanted to join YPO, which was a long goal of mine. Didn't know Barcelona was in there. So I had all these different things that to some degree I've hit. And And so it scares me a little bit, but also excites me. I don't yet have that clear vision to that degree where my life is like 10 years from today.
I get it.
What I do know is my older kids will both be in college, will both be out of college already.
Wow.
And my youngest, who's in 4th grade, I think will be, he's 9, so he'll be 19 years, he'll be in college then. Wow. So we'll be empty nesters, right? So, or maybe not, but at least, 10 years is not that long a time. We were just talking about that when we were doing this together.
Yeah.
So I think one of the challenges and opportunities for all of us is to think more on, there's a lot less. You think you can kind of accomplish a lot more than you can in a year, but you underestimate what you can do in a decade. Yeah. So I certainly want my life to look different in a significant way. And so we'll have to stay tuned to see what that is.
Love it. If you could have a billboard anywhere in the world, what would it say and why?
You asked when you said that to me before, I'm like, don't tell me because I didn't have an answer to that. I was like, maybe if you tell me on the spot, I'll have it. So I'm just out of curiosity, does anything pop into your head of what other people have said to that question?
A lot of people do plugs for their business. I feel like I can see you going more personal than business for this. Maybe just like a personal message that you feel like has inspired you that would inspire others if they saw it along the day. Maybe they were stuck in traffic or, yeah. Yeah,
I think one of the areas that I always get challenged with is the advice that my dad gave me. I think everybody can use it because it's both for the micro and the macro, is make a decision. Because not making a decision is also making a decision. So I've always felt better when I made a decision on a tough call, even the wrong decision, than going 6 months or longer, just kind of going back and forth. Yeah. So yeah, I'll use that.
If people want to reach out to you, what's the best way for them to reach out to you on social media?
Yeah, today LinkedIn is my place.
He's crushing on LinkedIn right now.
I set a commitment to do a post a day, every day.
And they're like high quality posts too.
Thank you, appreciate that. See you guys. Sorry, my son just left,
hey,
so this is
life,
the real
right?
life.
Yeah.
But to do a post a day, every day, and I'll leave it on this lesson of why I do that. Jerry Seinfeld, when he was starting out as a comedian, went up to one of the elder comedians and said, "What's your recommendation on how to write good jokes?" And the guy goes to him, "Well, instead of spending one day a month and taking the whole day to write jokes every day, but just write 3 jokes a day. And your focus ends up becoming never to break the chain, so you're always focused on never breaking the chain, so you don't overthink." And so that's what I said, I'm not going to break the chain to post weekdays on LinkedIn. And so I don't overthink what I'm going to, this might get nobody viewing, this might get a lot. And so I love that part of my morning routine, and routines are important, is I do my journal and then I write my LinkedIn post. And like today, I was stuck. I didn't know where to go. And I love the creativity that gets you to where you end up. I would love to have, don't get me wrong, hundreds of likes versus dozens of likes, but maybe someday.
I think you'll get there. Do you have any questions for me?
I mean, I'll ask you one question. I always wonder, and hopefully I'll never have to, look, we're all going to go through life-changing events at some point in our life. You just went through cancer and you're just coming out of it. I'm sure there were moments where you thought that was it, and you were really low. And you never know how you're going to show up there. So I'm just curious, how did you show up? What is your experience shares with others who are just average, living a normal life, and then this hits them in the head? Yeah.
So for anyone that doesn't know, I think one of the most amazing things of my story is they found about 5 or 6 years earlier than most people. Right. So I got very lucky. My dog, I had an injury. I went to the doctor. Turned out I didn't have the injury they thought, but they found a tumor. And you spend hundreds of hours around people who are actually dying, and you start to realize what's actually important in life. And at the end of your life, you're not going to remember your money or if you had a career that you were super passionate about. What you remember is the meaningful parts of life. What was your purpose? What was your legacy? And I think Roger and I spending a lot of time together doing these podcasts, I was always so focused on making sure that I was leaving a legacy I was proud of. Something that if my daughter didn't know me, she could go back and she could see it and, be really proud of who her dad was. So I think for me, every day now I wake up, I'm not just focused on getting shit done. And I think that was my strategy
Yeah, look, you're telling me the Monday morning quarterback version of it. What was the rawness component? Like, how do you, like, when you went to what is a cancer, potentially life, threatening diagnosis from the day before thinking everything was fine. And like you said to me, what were my strategies? What were your strategies at that moment to get through that? Now I get you're doing where you're at. Yeah. But in that moment, how do you get through it?
Relying on my community, my family. It's so overwhelming at the time. So trying to break it down into small, manageable steps. I saw probably 5 different doctors, and 5 different doctors told me different things. Yeah. So it's like, who do you believe? And these are the best of the best, not only for cancer doctors, but we're in New York City, so they're the best doctors in the world. So
that's crazy.
Yeah. So for everyone, and they all had different strategies on how they would do the surgery. So I think at the end of the day, just like anything else, you got to trust your instinct. You got to trust your gut. And, I never felt like I was alone during the entire process. And, one of my friend's dad, who was also going through prostate cancer at the exact same time as me, I remember him mentioning to me, have a picture, like your happiest moment picture. So when I was at the hospital, you could see that photo when times got tough. Yeah.
What was the photo? The dog?
No, the photo was my wife and my daughter, us on the beach before everything happened. So, tough. But, yeah.
It's amazing that, how raw it is. Yeah. And, me sitting here, we're just doing an interview, but how you can get to that place so quickly. And that's life right there. That emotion to get through the interview process to actually be what's important. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah. And I think I'm very grateful. Most people don't end with a success story. And I think that's why every doctor to this day, I still believe, wanted me as their patient. Because most of the time it's 5 or 6 years later, the cancer spread through your whole body. Right. So, doctors want easy wins just like you want easy wins in life. And,
totally.
My recommendation to everyone is just if I wasn't on top of listening to my body, get
checkups.
Yeah. Don't fuck around when it comes to your own body. I mean, I talk to people all the time. They're like, I need to go to the doctor. So just make an appointment, put it on your calendar, and go to the doctor.
I'm one of those, and I'm like, who do I go to? I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
I think we should end here before we're at 9 minutes and 23 seconds. Yeah. So we know what's going to happen.
Shout out to everyone. Shout out to David. Thank you so much for sharing. He's one of the most inspiring people. And
thank you.
Make sure you find his book on Amazon. Make sure you follow him on LinkedIn. He's crushing the LinkedIn game right now. And I appreciate you letting us come into your home.
No, thank you. We all have our own insecurities about the impact that we're having. So it's always good to hear, someone say it in person.
Yeah, 10 years later, man, you're still inspiring me.
I appreciate that, and I can't wait to see what you do in 10 years from now.
I love it.
Peace. All right.
Thank you very much.
What are questions to you take this as a framework and use it more, but it just makes life so much easier. What also makes you realize is like, you think you have your own idea about shit, and